Collin Brewer is here to talk to us about ChatGPT. Collin Brewer is a senior developer. He's worked on major business, marketing, financial applications, and he's been doing this at a high level for a very long time. He's one of the smartest people I know. Yeah, you introduced me to ChatGPT at the end of last year. I'd never heard of it, and you were like, "How do you not know about this?" And so I started looking at it, and you were basically trying to tell me, no, you don't understand. You don't understand what this is. So tell me a little bit about why is ChatGPT different than other things we've used like Jasper?
It's an interesting question because it's really comes down to generalization versus specialization. Like Jasper is specialized software that is purpose built, right? It's built with a business task in mind. It actually leverages GPT under the hood for some of its models. So to say that they're different is fair, but also unfair. You get a little bit of the GPT flair in using Jasper, whether you know it or not.
I'll echo what you said. Like Jasper, we've used it and experimented with that for a little bit, and it's like a use case thing where you basically can even choose templates like a Google ad or a blog post, and so whereas ChatGPT is much more open-ended, and you're telling it what you want. I definitely see what you're saying there. So in that case, whereas Jasper, it's got some pre-built things where you're leveraging it that way. With ChatGPT, it's kind of wide open. What would you say are some of the best uses for something like ChatGPT?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about it is that the CEO and of the OpenAI group, Sam Altman, he's been on record suggesting that the long-term envisionment of where it's going to go is that you'll be able to kind of build an AI custom to your needs using a chat-like interface, right? So imagine in some amount of time being able to build your own version of Jasper and it fill those shoes, but you didn't have to engage with Jasper. You just engage with some sort of natural user interface like ChatGPT and got it to generate a tailor-made AI for your needs. And so then really the question becomes you start having the ability to kind of spin up, for all intents and purposes, like a VA. And that VA you may find one VA over here that has a specific skill set and a need that you have to fill, and then you can turn around here and build another one that fills a different skill set and wears a different hat for you. So it's very very different. I think you're seeing what Jasper can do now is very brute forcey, where I think eventually ChatGPT will be the opposite of that.
Well, we have an associate. He's in the marketing space, and he's been talking a lot about how he's training ChatGPT on two things: on his voice, like what he wants his voice to sound like using ChatGPT, and also his educating ChatGPT on who his persona is, like who his target customer is, and teaching it. So that makes total sense with what you're saying there.
But you're saying, I could use ChatGPT and have, one instance here where I've trained it to do this thing, and one instance here where I've trained this other one to do this thing, and think of it almost like its own robot staff, like robot employees, instead of people employees, because they're all trained to do different things.
Yeah, its own entity. And then, also the idea there is, sticking with that metaphor, much like you would train a staff member with maybe a corpus, documentation on how the job is done, and maybe you need to scale your team out, or maybe you need to have a new hire. What if you take that corpus and just pump it into something like ChatGPT, and now you have that new instance? And then it makes it very easy to adjust that corpus and have somebody who's not so set in their ways just automatically follow that corpus for you, right?
So I'm thinking SOPs, can you, uploading your SOPs and teaching it how to do stuff. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
I was just going to say, you don't have to break down bad practices. You go, I don't like that practice. We're going to have a sit down. We're going to go through this for a couple, 30 days, 60 days, and we're going to have to, right these wrongs. Nah, it's just done.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, but basically it's Skynet and we need to destroy it before it kills us all.
If ChatGPT and Boston Dynamics somehow had a baby, we would be in trouble.
Yeah. So, but there are some dangers that people are talking about, like some real things that people are concerned about. I mean, people are concerned about jobs, obviously. Like some of the things we've talked about, we've seen it write WordPress plugins for people. It's even like writing worship songs. Like it's doing like some like crazy things. I showed it to my dad when he was in town not long ago. He asked it to write a monologue that sounded like Robin Williams. And I have to say, it wasn't hilarious, but I could hear Robin Williams' voice in it. So it's crazy, but there's some real dangers that people are talking about. And so I think especially for like professors, like what does this mean for professors who are trying to make sure that their students' work is authentic and things like that. But you sent me an article, I think last week or the week before, and we've had this like long conversation that's been going on for years about using AI to detect AI. And so you sent me this article about this like 22-year-old guy, and he's basically doing that, trying to save the world, and I think he called it prevent the hallmarkization of our lives or content or something like that.
Yeah.
So just talk a little bit about that, because we've been talking about that for so long, and I love the idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you can fall, it's a really polarizing topic, and I think you can fall on either side of it depending on if you're optimistic or pessimistic, and going back to your point, Casey, like best uses, I think the best case use cases, at least right now, are just increasing our productivity curve, right? Doing these mundane tasks and stuff that we at least as a internet society have done a bajillion times over and over. And this is seen in software engineering. It's why it can write a WordPress plugin, because we've done it so many times. That's all it really comes down to. But beyond that, I think it's augmented knowledge, right? And so that part of it is really interesting. And I think that's where you kind of where the gray area kind of starts tipping from black to white, at least for me. The idea that, I was playing with it the other day, and I had it, I started off writing a blog article, okay? And ChatGPT is under capacity right now, or I'd read it to you. But the idea was, I had no clue what I was going to write. I don't write blog articles. It's not something I need to do regularly. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna poke around with this thing, see what we can do. So I wrote a blog article, and then I stopped it halfway. I'm like, I don't want to write a blog article. It's too easy. I don't want long form. So I'm like, never mind. I stopped it dead in its tracks. I said, never mind, make it a tweet. And what I was going for is I wanted to write an article that touted the benefits of chiropractic care, right? And so it wrote me out a very hallmarkized, I don't know what the proper term there is for hallmarkization, but it wrote me a very vanilla, bland, sterile bit of copy that talked about an article that you've probably all read 1,000 times over, and you could probably replace chiropractic care with anything else and it still would have made sense, right? Very boring. So I was like, okay, well, never mind. I stopped at Dennis tracks. I was like, it's already boring me. So let's do a tweet instead. So it maintained its context. I didn't have to re-explain it like you would to, Siri or Google Home or whatever. It picked right back up where it left off and rewrote it as a tweet. Still very sterile. But this is where it started to get interesting. I'm like, okay, my subject matter expertise on chiropractic care went about that far as well. So that's about the same tweet I would have been able to write, right? So then I said, okay, well, who's the most famous chiropractor? Let's include like that as a reference. Okay, so it dug up some chiropractor and put that in there as part of the comment. Okay, that's cool. Still very boring though, and I was like, yeah, be more snarky. I want it to be snarky, right? So immediately it rewrote that exact same tweet, still a tweet, still made the same reference to the popular chiropractor, except now it was a little bit snarky. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty good, but it's still pretty bland. And so I was like, no, make it a little bit more irreverent, So it rewrote it again, and this time it was like, okay, we got a little zingers in there, and I needed to feed it a little more. You know what I mean? It needed a little more substance. So I was like, okay, now make a dig against, and I'm using these terms. I'm not dumbing it down. I'm using, some language that would need to be understood by like a native English speaker. So I said, okay, dig on massage therapists who focus on fascial massage. So it rewrote the tweet again, still touting the benefits of chiropractic care, still maintaining the reference to the popular chiropractor, still snarky, and now made a dig against fascial massage. And then I said, that's good, and keep in mind, the whole point here is that I still have very little understanding of the benefits of fascial massage versus chiropractics. I don't know who that chiropractor is. So I have expanded my own knowledge beyond what I would be able to do, and I'm doing it in a very natural way. So we keep going down this path, and what I ultimately ended up having it do was make a Doogie Howser reference, which I'm more a 90s kid than I am an 80s kid. So Doogie Howser was in my cursory knowledge enough that I know who he is and what he was about. But to recall details of the stories and that sort of thing is I was 8 years old or something like that, right? So I said, make a Doogie Howser reference. And of course it did. It made a Doogie Howser reference, but it was very shallow. It was very bland. And I was like, that's not good enough for me. Let's tag Neil Patrick Harris. And it did dig up his actual Twitter handle. It did include it in the tweet. And then I was like, this is good. But now what I want you to do is I want you to parallel the fascial massage therapist as Doogie Howser's arch enemy. And so it pulled up a character whom I have no clue if it's a real character or not without further validation. And it dug up Vinny Del Pino, which was actually his friend. And it said, you fascial massage therapists are no Vinny Del Pino. So I was able to write this tweet in a matter of 45 seconds, maybe 90 seconds, using a natural interface with information I truly did not have on multiple facets.
Yes, but in my opinion, you did so much original thinking on your own. Thinking of, comparing it to the myofascial massage therapist, first of all, and then deciding to bring in Doogie Howser. It's like, these are things that it's not going to come up with. Like, you did so much original thinking, but I do appreciate how it was able to, you don't know Vinny Del Pino. So that's cool how it brought it all together. But I'm not going to discount. See, I'm pro-human. I'm not going to discount all of the original thought brought to the table by the human.
And so that's why I say, that to me is where the gray area tips from black to white, right? I used it in the same way that I would have used an internet search, in the same way I would have used a library or a really knowledgeable subject matter expert, a friend or a coworker, and called them up and said, hey, who's Doogie Howser's arch enemy? Can you remember a reference to one of the episodes and that I can pull in here? I was able to do that, but I was able to do it far faster than any other way I would have been able to do it.
Yeah.
And I would argue that there's a cost to the context switching that I didn't have to do. I drummed up all of that thought because I was so connected to the conversation.
Yeah. Very interesting. We recently did a copywriting competition between me and ChatGPT.
We did.
I love it.
We put to write a script for a TV commercial that we knew we were going to shoot. Like, this was a project for a TV commercial, and we did. Yeah, we put Matt up against ChatGPT. ChatGPT was adequate. It got some context that I didn't think it would. It was around brain. It was around brain health, and so it actually did a pretty good job. But we asked it to make it funny, and I think I described it as lighthearted at best.
Yeah.
So if I had stuck with it a bit more, maybe I could have got it somewhere. But it didn't compare to Matt's. Like the level of humor and that kind of stuff, it just didn't compare.
But I think what he said, you could eventually probably train it.
Yeah, I probably.
Using our original thought, if we were to input that much stuff, we could eventually get it to somewhere that was good. Well, and it wrote its in 6 seconds, and it took me about 35 minutes.
Yeah, I think what would be interesting is what he's talking about. We took Matt's script and back to our team of writers, comedians, and we worked on it more.
Right.
If we had, that was one single output from ChatGPT. If we had done what you're talking about and said, okay, now this, but change this and make it more like this, it'd have been interesting to see where it could have gone. But yeah, super interesting.
I think that what you were talking about like training them and treating them like specialized employees for your team, like that blows my mind. I think that's super cool. Like super productive, efficient. Like I wouldn't want to take anybody's job because of it, but
Yeah.
super interesting.
What? Yeah, and that's the thing. It's already to some degree ChatGPT. Like going back to like the Jasper versus ChatGPT. ChatGPT is so expansive, but also so generalized. You can say, you know, write me this, you know, this script. Now write it in Spanish. Now write it in French. Now write it in German, and like 25 other languages in a matter of minutes. And so you already kind of have that capability because it can switch gears. You know, Jasper is very, you know, directed and specialized in that way. ChatGPT is not. It's like, okay, cool. I'll just go do that. And then I'll just go do this, you know, and then I'll also write, you know, I use it for software engineering, right? And it can write code for me, and then it can rewrite it for me in a different language. It knows like 15 or 20, you know, programming languages as well. So you can kind of already do that. You can instruct it to have a tone. You know, you can instruct it to use stylistic choices like another author, you know, and that sort of thing. So you kind of already have some of that capability, but I think it'll expand on that quickly.
That's cool. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds just did a Mint mobile commercial using ChatGPT. Did you see that one?
No.
You didn't? Yeah, it's pretty funny. He basically says, I asked ChatGPT to write our commercial. I told it, give it our offer.
In the voice of
Ryan Reynolds, it needs to have a joke and a curse. And it did it. And he was like, that's terrifying.
Nice. How was it?
He's reading, the commercial is him reading the script. But so
right.
It has a flavor, it still has Ryan Reynolds in it.
Yeah.
Which is key.
Sure. His delivery, his flair.
Yeah.
Right.
But it wasn't bad on the tone. Him delivering it made it that much better. But yeah, it was super interesting.
Sure.
It understood the context of everything.
That part's the part that I think that was the most impressive part to me, is its ability to maintain context throughout lengthy conversations. And that's, again, if ChatGPT is specialized in anything, it's that. It's like a chat, you know, it's a communication, it's ability to have a conversation.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Collin Brewer.
Love you guys. Thanks for having me.